The thoughts over at The Big Think have seemingly gotten smaller and smaller as time has progressed. A channel that once concerned itself with science and philosophy has seemed to move more towards the realm of politics. And more egregiously than that, the realm of correct politics. And identity politics. So now we get to talk about cultural appropriation, or, in other words, why white people are evil and are stealing all of the cool things.
With cultural appropriation, the first time I really thought about this hard was actually with the Last Airbender movie. It came out a few years ago. It was based on this amazing television show, an animated TV series called Avatar: The Last Airbender, which some people say, and I agree with this, some people say Avatar: The Last Airbender is the best written American animated series ever.
The animated series was made by two white men, and the voice cast was primarily composed of white voice actors. How is this not cultural appropriation, and why is what the movie did different?
So when they adapted this show from the animated series to a live-action film, they took all of the lead roles. The original show was actually set in this fantasy world, but it's a fantasy world that was based on real-world Asian cultures. And if you look at the show Bible, if you look at the show notes, all the characters are supposed to look either Asian or Inuit. So they took all those roles and they gave them to white actors.
So how is that any different than what happened with the animated series? The only distinction I can see is that in the movie, you could see that the characters were being played by white actors, whereas you could not see the voice actors of the animated series. Is this superficial distinction the extent of your criticism? You had to see white people in the movie. The movie was still based off of an animated series that was largely inspired by Asian and Inuit culture, but was still interpreted from the perspective of non-Asians or Inuits.
I got in touch with this group called racebending.com.
The elusive fifth bending element of the Avatar universe, race.
Which calls out, Hollywood and different American storytelling industries on casting issues, on cultural appropriation. So cultural appropriation, I think it's a tricky issue because it's difficult to say what is being appropriated.
I know I should be upset about these white people on my screen, but I don't know why.
I think a larger issue, the larger question might be this. The larger question might be when you are interacting with a culture that is not your own, when you are interacting with a culture that has no roots, no ties to your family history, are you doing so in a humble and respectful manner?
All right, there are two ideas in that last sentence that need to be explored. Firstly, that of a culture tied to your family history. Our resident Asian here seems to be implying that, to a degree, cultural ownership can be passed down generationally. He, as someone with Chinese ancestry, is able to approach Chinese culture in a way we ought not. This sentiment is garbage and should be tossed out immediately. You do not own your culture, and no one from outside your culture is under any obligation to treat your culture in any particular way. This bleeds into the second point. Are we approaching culture in a humble and respectful manner? No, I don't, nor do I think I should. I'm of the position that respect is earned and is not something that should be given automatically. This goes for both people and cultures. How do I know whether or not your culture is deserving of my respect if I've yet to investigate it? There's a chance you have a shitty culture, not worthy of my respect.
Are you going in with a certain sense of humility? And are you going in with a posture of learning as opposed to a posture of teaching, or even worse, profiteering? I think those are the big questions within cultural appropriation.
I don't know what you mean by going in if you're not referring to investigation, and yes, if I'm investigating a culture, my primary goal is to learn. But even so, what's wrong with teaching that culture? Adding to or subtracting from or in some other way changing that culture? Even profiting from that culture? None of these come off as inherently bad. They're contextual. What are the changes, and are they for the good of the culture or the society or not? You can't just plop down "respect my culture as is" on the table and then not substantiate it. Only people who would already respect your culture would abide by that demand.
I know there's this huge debate about political correctness as well, and whether or not it's exceeded its original intention.
Why is the original intent of political correctness relevant? I can look at it and its effects now and recognize it as something that is detrimental. What it was supposed to be is of trivial concern when put up against what it is.
Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing.
Bad thing.
Whether it gets in the way of having a sense of humor.
Not whether or not it stops someone from having a sense of humor, but that it stifles people with a sense of humor from expressing what they find funny.
Like, I hear all that, right? My understanding of political correctness is this. My understanding is that political correctness is all about people figuring out what labels they themselves want to use.
You can figure out what you want to call yourself on your own, and that has no imposition on anyone else. This is not political correctness. Political correctness seeks to impose obligations on other people. It's not enough that you're satisfied with how you identify yourself. You want others to identify you by that as well.
It's giving people power over their own identities, right?
No, it's giving people power over the speech of other people.
Like, it's basically like me saying, I get to decide what you call me.
Right, and that is something I will not abide by.
It's tied into the history of colonialism, the history of people feeling like labels were placed on top of them and they had no say in what those labels were. So I think the heart of political correctness is about a respect for human dignity, about a respect for the dignity of every individual.
Do you think you're self-respectful when you demand that I adhere to your linguistic code of conduct? Do you think me disrespectful when I refer to you by what I honestly identify you as? I do not refer to a person by he, she, they, it, zir, or ear because I respect them. I refer to them by what labels I think best apply to them. I reject the notion that referring to someone by their preferred labels is a sign of respect. Labels are a communication tool. If there's a discrepancy between what I've identified someone as and what they've identified themselves as, I do not automatically grant their position more credence.
And in that way, I think it's an important I don't think we can just get rid of political correctness. I don't think that would be a good thing.
Why not? You've yet to remark on one positive aspect of political correctness. It puts an unjustified imposition on the speech of others and needlessly degrades communication.
I do think that there is an important conversation about the interface of political correctness and free speech. I think that's an interesting part, and I don't feel like I have any answers for that. But I do think that's an interesting and worthwhile conversation to have in a respectful manner.
The requirement that conversations be had in a respectful manner is part of political correctness. Anyone willing to grant that as a requirement already agrees with political correctness. You do not want a conversation. You merely want your way. And unfortunately for you, you don't get to have your way. Not if it comes at any imposition on my end. because ultimately I decide what I say, and that's a privilege I extend to no one else. Hey there. See all this spinny shit? That's right. I'm learning about keyframes, and I'm probably going to start adding animations to my videos. Aw yeah, production quality through the roof. Anyway, while I have you here mesmerized by my floating head, at some point in the future, I'm going to be doing a Q&A. Probably whenever I think I have a satisfactory number of questions. So if you have anything you'd like to ask me, leave it in the comments section, and I might get around to answering it in a future video.